All right, today's episode is all about personal finance. Super scary stuff for most, but bear with me. We've got two experts on the panel today, and we're going to be chatting about how you can get your debt load in check and how you can create a financial plan moving forward. Because guess what? 50% of Canadians and 50% of Americans are dealing with substantial financial stress, and this does not make you hard to kill. So by the end of this, we will be tracking in a better direction with respects to your finances. So stay tuned. Hey folks, another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast. Now that I'm back in Canada, I had to have Cody and Braden on. We had a quick chat while I was in Portugal about financial wellness, which was awesome, considering the only reason why I was in Portugal with my family was because we took the steps necessary to be able to do that financially. And the reason why this is relevant is because this is a podcast that's all focused on alternative health and health for the warfighter sheepdog community. There's something that is very, very, very important about getting your financial house in order. The science is very clear that if you do not have that in order, there's a whole wealth, no pun intended, of side effects that come about. And I think this is something that's going to be really, really, really important for you moving forward to help you get your financial health in order. So I welcome Cody and Braden. They are financial brokers with World Financial Group onto the podcast today. Fellas, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Great, man. Thanks for having us on here.
Absolutely.
I'm excited. It's gonna be fun.
Wicked. So just before we even got started, I was just impressed that we've already got pen and paper and we're going to be demonstrating some basic concepts on paper. So for those of you that are listening on YouTube or you're listening right now on audio, head over to my YouTube channel at Dave Morrow, and you can find me really easily with the bracket Hard to Kill. And you can have a look at all the little notes that literally are going to be up on the screen as we progress through that. So, Cody, let's start with you, man. Now you're a veteran.
Yeah.
And that's how we linked up. Canadian Armed Forces. Was it 3 VP you were with?
1 VP.
1 VP.
Yeah.
Awesome. So give us a little bit of the backstory. What led you from, being an infantry soldier to doing what you do now, which is in the financial space?
Yeah. So I joined the Army in it would have been April of 2003, went through basic and all that stuff out in Montreal area, got posted to Wainwright to do my infantry course out there, got posted to 1 VP and right when the battalion was going on Christmas break of 2003. So January 2004, got to 1 VP, did a couple of early courses with them, deployed to Kabul in 04-05 timeframe, came back to Kandahar in 06. And then again in 2010. Then in the summer of 2012, I was tasked out to Wainwright to teach a reserve infantry course. I was an instructor out there. And as I was riding my motorcycle out there one morning, a deer decided that she wanted to jump out of the ditch and pretty much land right in my lap doing highway. So put the bike down at 100, got to watch my beautiful victory cartwheel through the ditch. Ended up having a broken left tibia and fibula. That wasn't the worst of it. About a week and a half after I was released from the hospital from surgery, I had a double pulmonary embolism, which for those of you that don't know is blood clots in the lungs and heart. I actually had one that was right in the middle of my bronchial tube. So it was cutting off about, I think if I remember correctly, 55% of my lung capacity. And then the other one was actually in stuck on one of the valves in my heart. So I had less than 50% lung capacity and my heart was working at about 40%. So in really, really bad shape. I was in ICU for a week and a half on some pretty gnarly meds for that. Fast forward to when I got out in 2014, I had a sergeant major that was just kind of an old school. I was never in a cast for my broken leg. I was never, I wasn't on crutches. I wasn't immobile for too long because I had the surgeon actually put my leg back together with a rod and screw. So I was able to bear weight and kind of hobble around pretty quick.
Cool. So you're Iron Man.
Pretty kind of, yeah.
Nice.
But he just, I wouldn't say harassing, but it was to the point where I just didn't want to put up with that anymore. So I got posted to RHQ and 1VP, which is our kind of our regimental admin portion of it. We take care of the regiment's PR and big events and the association and VIP visits. But through that whole time frame, I was on pretty severe medical limitations because of the clotting issues I had. I was on some pretty gnarly blood thinners for a while. It's actually very common. A lot of people are on thinners, but the medical employment limitations of those are that you can't really do anything because, if you get a paper cut, your blood's not going to clot. You stub your toe, break your toe type thing. It's serious implications when your blood doesn't clot. So I was on those, kept getting bothered by my sergeant major and just ended up saying screw it and got out. Did what every good Alberta kid does. I went straight into the energy industry here. I went up to Fort McMurray, Alberta, started pipelining up there.
Right on.
Worked my butt off, started my welding apprenticeship, eventually became a journeyman welder. And through that whole time frame, slugging it out in the trades was right in 2014 to 2016, right when everything kind of fell out of the energy industry in Alberta. So it was a tough go. And then one December evening of 2019, I was packing up a welding truck at the end of the night, and one of the laborers was turning around a crew truck with a compressor. So a 1-ton pickup with probably weighed 10,000 pounds. And he pulled up close to us, which was not out of the ordinary. Myself and my coworker were loading up some stuff onto the back of a welding truck that night. And for whatever reason, when he put the truck into reverse, instead of going backwards, he came forward straight into us and actually pinned me between the deck of the welding truck and the front of the pickup. And this particular welding truck had like a 2-inch plate that stuck out so you could clamp pieces of steel onto it, which would have just been like a shear. Luckily for me, the way the deck was designed and the way he had some various implements and attachments on it actually provided enough standoff that I didn't get cut in half or crushed. I just had some very serious soft tissue damage. And then I was in the hospital for that. And now like my lower back and my hips and my pelvis are just stiff and sore every single day. And I don't think I could do being a welder hunched over in those positions for the next 20 years. And then I was introduced to the financial services industry. And I know in the first 3 months I was a client here, it totally changed my life just with my pension and the knowledge I got. And I just love passing it on and helping other guys with it. So we'll dig into a bunch of that. And here I am now, still kind of starting out in my journey. I know it'll take a few years before the cash flow really starts coming, but every person I talk to is a potential client. So
Right on. I love it, man. You realize that there was no more future laboring as a welder with 2 major accidents that cause serious damage to the body. So out of necessity, you're like, okay, what do I really enjoy? And it seemed to have, I guess, come almost serendipitously, like you needed a financial change. Then you realize, hey, this is something I really enjoy. Why don't I pursue it a little bit further? And that's really cool when you end up realizing that that's not something that typically you would have even pursued, 20 years ago. It's just something that happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the one thing that I really love about the way that we approach finances with our clients versus other institutions is we take a really educational and holistic approach to everything that we do, which you guys will all see upcoming here. So that's my favorite part about this, is just educating our clients and then showing them what that means for them.
Right. And that infantry background, that Canadian Armed Forces infantry sergeant or NCO background, right, where you have that like, I'm going to explain, then you're going to do it, and then we're going to do it again, and then we're going to make sure you get it right. And that's ingrained in us, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to make sure that you get this right, and I'm going to take you piece by piece. And that teaching part is really important. That's actually how I learned how to teach. I was a teacher after I got back from from my tour. That was what I was trained in. But I'll be honest, I didn't learn anything when I was in my teacher's college phase. I learned everything when I was going through PLQ and all that
Yeah.
stuff on how to become a good instructor. Is all fundamentals of being a good instructor, and like making sure that your class, your students can progress and scaffold every step of the way. So it's really interesting that you still apply that in what you do now in the financial world. And that's what really piqued my interest when we had that chat
Yeah.
there a few weeks ago, is that you had the lesson plan basically built.
Yeah.
And you go through it, and it's a very logical process. Now, I know a bit of that already. So for the I guess the learner that is at a beginner level, that might be a little like that's a lot of information like coming your way. And it's cool that you've broken it down into kind of bite-sized pieces. So I'll send it over to Braden, and then we'll have a look at just some fundamentals and things that you can teach us moving forward. So Braden, you're the young buck. I don't think you had any massive traumas, but what's your story? What got you into financial services at this age? And help people?
Okay, so kind of a funny story is I was that close to being the guy that like went into the military after high school. It was literally like the day I was going to go see the recruiters, because they were all checking out our high school and stuff, because the whole football team went, they had the big career fair, all that stuff.
In Alberta?
And where was that, sorry?
In Alberta?
Yeah, I grew up in Drayton Valley, Alberta. Like originally it was Calgary. We moved to Drayton in like 2013. Mom basically remarried. They were oil field money. We were all just like living out there in the oil field dream. I went to the little schools they had there, which I love. I love like small town values and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for me, so it was like high school, and I was pretty determined throughout high school because all I really cared about was like football and sports. So I was like, I'm either going to university to go be like a kinesiologist or a personal trainer, or I'm going to the military. And I was like 90% sure it was the military because a couple of my buddies were going. And like the day before we were supposed to go, I think we were all going to rip to the city and go do like the application or something. I can't even remember at this point. But it was like the day before, my mom found out. And she was just like so against it. She was like,
hard no.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was just, and like, I get where she's coming from too, but like she was real scared and convinced me not to do it. And the same night, family friend of ours, so Brian, mom's boyfriend, he started a company building houses, right? And their concrete guy that they basically used for everything, really entrepreneurial guy, one of the biggest mentors I've ever had in my life. His name's Jesse Halliday, awesome human being. And he came over because they were just kind of ripping it up. I think it was like a Thursday night, but it was like after all the work had got done, they poured a bunch of driveways for him. Jesse came over and we were just like farting around in the backyard, like arm wrestling and stuff. He was talking about how awesome concrete is. And he kind of recruited me to concrete that night. And I was like working in a hotel job at the time and literally just being the pool boy for like a hotel.
Right. And
he told me, quit your job, come work with me concrete tomorrow. And then 6 years later, I was still doing the same thing. I loved it, right? I loved the crew, I loved the work and all that kind of stuff. But the main problem was that, like 5 or 6 months of the year, I'd be laid off because it's just too cold to pour concrete. Alberta, we get cold in the winter here.
Yeah, I heard it gets pretty cold out there. Yeah.
Yeah, like minus 50. It's nothing. But yeah, so I would be laid off all the time. And I was still really big into fitness, right? I was still working out all the time. I bulked right up. So I was trying to get like into the fitness industry, right? I wanted to be like working in a gym or be a personal trainer or like a bodybuilder or something. And I was a big guy. I'm like 5'9", but I was sitting at like 220 pounds and I was just, kind of feeling it. I was getting pretty good. And I was reaching out to literally just all the clothing companies I could find on Instagram. And I was trying to get them to give me free stuff, basically. Right. So I was laid off. I was eating ramen noodles and protein powder every day. I was like, I want cool gym merch. So I'm like reaching out to just like, I had like 100 followers too. And I'm like, hey, if you give me some free merch, I'll rep you on my Insta.
They're like, I don't know, kid.
Yeah. So just totally just out to lunch with it. And I reached out to Ben Hilborn. He's the guy that taught me everything in this business. And he owned a clothing company at the time. It was just some little side thing he did a couple of years ago. And he just kind of called me out. It's like, hey man, well, what are you doing with your life other than just like posting shirtless pictures on Instagram? And I was like, good point. So he invited me down to the office. So the office that we're in right now. And he's like, just come check it out. We're doing a little bit of a workshop. And I just want to show you what we do, what we teach people. And I showed up mainly because I thought there was going to be free pizza. I didn't really know what was going on. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do this like in my free time, right? And, maybe when I'm laid off or whatever. Right. And I showed up and I saw the stuff that we're going to go through later today, just like the financial concepts and strategies, actually teaching people financial literacy and everything like that. Mm-hmm. And then also, financial literacy, like the highest paying industry in the world. I saw a lot of dollar signs on some of the incomes that some of these guys were earning. And I was like, oh, this is like the Wolf of Wall Street, but they've got moral fiber. And I was all excited and I was all fired up. I had no idea what I was doing. I had really no background at all. And I just wanted to learn, right? So I showed up, started working part-time. I went back to work and then I just plugged it on evenings and weekends for probably my first year. Got laid off at the end of 2019. COVID hit. And I was just like, well, that's a good sign as any to kind of really dive into things. And I just stuck around and here we are today. And I just, I met Stumper on the way and I've been working with him over the last like 2-ish years. Got a couple other people that I'm training right now and just really trying to get out there and just help as many people as we can.
Right on. Yeah. That dedication to making sure that you can help other people out and improve their lives. That is the essence of being fulfilled. I think. Mm-hmm. For anybody, right? If you can at the end of the day be like, hey man, I help somebody out, man, like they're doing better. That's why I do what I do. And it sounds like that's what you do on a day-to-day as well, which is really cool. Yeah. Hey man, what position did you play when you were playing football?
I was weak outside linebacker.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I weighed like 35 pounds. So I was played 9-man football. It was a small town, but we all came back.
Cool. Yeah, your football is big out there, man. You got such good football programs. We got pretty good ones here too in Quebec. Used to play a little bit as well back in the day. Made it up to like here we have CJEP, which is like in between high school and university.
Okay.
I really excelled at making sure like the end of the bench was like super warm. That was like that was my claim to fame. Like I just defensive end, but really like I just kept that bench super warm and made sure like Buddy had his water when he's coming off the field. It's like there you go. And eventually I'll get back in. That's what kind of like military. I was like, well, military's I think a better go than my lack of football skills. I think I'm going to make the shift and take something I'm actually good at and run with it. So cool. So I love the fact that you guys have got that passion to make sure that other people are doing better, obviously in the financial space. So let's start with financial literacy. Now, this is something that I only started like tuning into 4 years ago ish. I was a teacher. I was making a crap salary. I had honestly taken a 50% cut in my salary because I left the military, and I didn't think twice about the implications because I had a girlfriend, fiance at the time, we're getting married. She had a great salary. I was like, I was a typical, like, I don't need money kind of guy. I'm fine. Like, what do I need like a good salary for? Like, I'll be okay. I can live off $45,000 a year. I'll be all right. Yeah. And I slowly started to realize like there's something that I wasn't catching on to. My friends were doing better. I didn't really feel good about myself. Although I don't put a lot of value on like how much I'm making, I still like to be able to go out and buy something from time to time that I want, but I wasn't able to because my earnings were so small at that period in time. And my earning potential was so small because I was incrementally only going up below that, and I wasn't even beating inflation every year with the salary increases. So that's what kind of clued me in. I'm like, hold on a sec. Every year I work here, I'm losing money. This doesn't make any sense. Is anybody like cluing into this? And then there was a woman that came in for our pensions. And I realized at that moment, I was like, I made a big mistake because even with my pension, I can only retire at 65. I'm not going to make it to 65 because these kids are going to drive me crazy. What am I going to do? And so I had a conversation literally with a student of mine who they were doing a student stock exchange. they asked me like a genuine conversation, a genuine a question, sir, how's your portfolio doing? And I laughed because I am a kid. I'm a teacher. I don't have a portfolio. I go to work, I make money, it disappears. That's my portfolio.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, sir, well, why don't you have like some stock? You can just start buying. Like I have my own, and like my dad helped me start mine. And I was like, and that just started the gears turning. All these things came together, and it was like, wait a second. I can figure this out. I'm not stupid. I can read a book. Like I can go online. And that's what started the process. And that's literally why I'm here now, because it changed everything about how I view money and how I view wealth and success, was because I just decided to kind of break my paradigm that I was in and accept that I don't know everything and I need to kind of change things. So learn and financial. Yeah, exactly. I knew zero. I was like, well, I can start anywhere and I will be better tomorrow just by reading anything.
Exactly.
And we didn't learn it in school, right? We didn't learn it anywhere. And I think that's probably the people that you come across that come and see you. It's like we go through life. Some people go through their entire lives never learning a thing about finances. Yeah. And it's a shame. So let's say I'm coming to you. I'm me 4 years ago. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm lost in the sauce. Where do we start?
Yeah. So the first thing that we do is we'll book an appointment, right? And then we have what's called our sort of initial presentation, which is it's the broad brush presentation of how we go about helping our clients. So, we explain that we're brokers and we shop around for our clients. And then we'll take a holistic approach. So we don't just say, okay, you need, to start putting $500 a month away and then have $1 million in your account when you're 60. We say, okay, well, what's your budget? How can we help free up cash flow within that budget to generate more, freed up cash at the end of the month? And then there's a few ways we go about doing that. Maybe they have mortgage insurance and, they're high on their credit card and they have a mortgage coming up for renewal. Well, one of the ways is with the volume that we've done with one of our mortgage partners last year, we just get wholesale pricing. So just by me referring a client for a new mortgage, they're already going to get a better rate than if they were just to walk back into their bank. And then taking that holistic approach with, say, like the mortgage life insurance. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with the mortgage insurance. Sometimes it's called creditor insurance or creditor protection. It's better than nothing, but it's a really terrible product, if I can say that. Because the lenders have it tied to the lenders sell it and they tie it to a loan. Whereas if they have a personal plan through a licensed advisor, then we can usually find them more for the same price or get them the same amount for usually 20 to 30% less. There's just better options with it. Like there's assigned beneficiaries, so it bypasses certain things. We can use it for different things down the road, and then we educate them on why they would do that. We help with someone with budgeting. So we want to know where every dollar goes in that month, because a few clients we found out, they, bringing home $5,500 a month, they can't figure out why they're broke. And it turns out they're spending $2,000 a month on, eating out type thing.
McDonald's and protein shakes.
Yeah, skip the dishes and
right.
Protein shakes and McDonald's and
okay,
all stuff that again just eats into the finances. And we just look at it like, okay, where's the money going? So we want to know where every dollar is going, and then we'll just analyze it and make our recommendations based on that. And then we teach why someone would want to have a proper investment portfolio with a proper investment company versus, say, just a GIC at the bank, or even at the bank, why, they might be in a growth portfolio, but they're only getting 5.5 as an example. Whereas with
percent you're talking about, right?
Yeah. 5.5% returns on average, or if they were with a proper company through like myself, why we could get them a lot more with it in the same risk category.
Now, so the first step then would essentially be awareness, like budgeting and all that stuff is literally just putting it all out in front of you, being like, okay, well, the numbers don't lie. This is literally what you spent. This is what you historically spent every month for I don't know how long. And so this is how much cash is coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've got the facts. So what would be the next step? Like, and let's give it, like, I'll use me as an example. Like,
Yeah.
I never, like, I didn't understand like credit cards. I didn't understand mortgages. I was, getting into like buying a property. Like, I was young. I made enough money. I had a bunch of money saved from my tour, like a lot of money saved.
Yeah.
But I had no idea where to put it. So let's take me as an example. Like, I had like 20 grand. It was literally just sitting in my bank account. And then I had, the potential of buying a new place, and I had a salary, but it was small.
Yeah.
What does a guy like me at that age do?
How would you answer that one, Braden?
So, couple things there. So first off, the way we like to operate, and I mean, this is just part of compliance and everything in general, is before I make any kind of suggestions whatsoever, we go through something called an info gather. Basically what that is, two-sided piece of paper. Front one talks about like financial goals, when's the last time they reviewed their finances, how much money is coming into the house on a monthly basis. So, income, maybe they get the child tax credit, maybe they're just selling cars on the side, making an extra $1,000 a month. I just need to know how much money is coming in so we know what to work with, how much money somebody wants to retire on down the road, because that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. So we get that first, right? We figure out actually where they're at. On the back side of the page, there's like assets, liabilities, what kind of insurances they have, what kind of payments are going towards everything. So you actually know what's going on, right? It's like when you go to the doctor and you get your blood pressure and your pulse and everything checked. Well, you're not going to walk into a hospital and they're just going to like take one look at you and say like, okay, you need Xanax or something like that, right? They're going to look at your vitals, talk about the symptoms, see what's going on first, and then make suggestions, right? So usually what we'll go through the initial presentation and kind of talk about the fundamentals, like the concepts and strategies that we teach everybody. And then once they have a basic understanding of how we operate, how we help people out, how we work as a planner, then we figure out what their situation is like. And then based on their situation, we make suggestions, right? And it really depends after that, client to client. But if you want, I can give you a super, super simple thing. If I can.
Of course.
So this is, I'm pretty sure we got it from like Dave Ramsey back in the day, if anybody's ever followed him. But I talk about this with every client, and it's just the 6 steps to a financial plan, because it's a really, really easy way of kind of breaking it down. And the way I like to look at a financial plan, I come from a construction background. I like to think of it as building a house, or like building a tower or something like that, right? So if we got 1, 2, 3, mind my writing, by the way. So if we got 6 steps to actually building a proper financial plan, the first one is when it comes to cash flow. So we work as brokers, right? We partner with 50 or 60 of the top financial companies in Canada. Due to compliance, I can't really say the names, but through those companies, there's another 200 or so that we work with, right? So when we first sit down with somebody, right, we'll get that info gather, kind of see what they have going on already, and we'll go shop around. We'll do apples to apples comparisons of everything they're already doing and try to free up cash. So whether that's with a mortgage, right? I know 2020 was huge with mortgage rates being so low. Maybe between the mortgage, consolidating some debt, helping them shop around, finding some better insurance rates. Stumper was kind of talking about creditor insurances and stuff. I'll explain that a little bit more in a bit here. But maybe between all the different insurances, their investments, helping deal with their debt, we free up, I don't know, $1,000 a month, right? Depends on the client. Sometimes it's more. A lot of times it can be less. Let's call it $1,000, right? Well, now that client has $1,000 to work with. So maybe, right, that $1,000 or what's within that $1,000, that's what we use for their entire financial plan, right? And it depends. It depends on their goals and their situation. But that's what we want to do first. Free up as much cash as we can on a monthly basis, because that's the most important thing, right? Monthly income in this situation. So after cash flow, we want to focus on debt management. So I'm not a licensed trustee or anything like that, but we partner with companies that deal with debt. So debt consolidations, if we can roll it into equity in a house or something like that, or something like a consumer proposal, which I'm not going to dig into too much because it'll take a bunch of time. But basically, it's an alternative to going bankrupt. where instead of us just kind of getting torn apart by the system there, they'll go and negotiate our debt for us essentially. So instead of, they'll basically say, hey, you're trying to get $600,000 out of this person, they can't afford it. Here's 200 grand, take it or leave it. Because if you don't, they're going to go bankrupt.
And it's zero anyways. So yeah,
you're going to get basically nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever we have to do to free up debt, we're going to try to, right? After that, we want to talk about an emergency fund. And this is a big one. And another thing I want to say too, so if we're talking about building a house, these first three here, or I mean, the first two basically are like when you show up to a plot of land and it's just got tree roots everywhere and there's like a burnt down car on it and there's like critters living on it or whatever. These first two is like when you show up and you start clearing the weeds and you like flatten the ground out and everything like that. Next two, 3 and 4, that's more of building our foundation, right? And that's when it comes to an emergency fund, which the way I like to describe it, it's anywhere from 3 to 6 months of somebody's expenses. So if somebody needs $4,000 a month to pay all of their bills, well, they're going to need anywhere from like $12,000 to $24,000 cash. Usually I recommend it in like a savings account. If they're worried about being financially disciplined and worried that they're going to spend it, we can also set up an account here where there's like a barrier of entry if they need access to it. So if they're like, hey, I want to go to, I want to go to Cabo, give me my emergency fund. It's like,
not really what that's for.
If you really want it, I have to give it to you, but let's talk about this first, right? And just kind of give them a little bit of extra wisdom there, right? But you want to have that first because, let's say something happens. Maybe we get laid off or whatever, and we don't have cash saved up or the car breaks down or whatever. What's the first thing people do? They start spending their retirement savings. They start canceling their insurances. They start racking up credit cards.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to have that in place. After that, proper protection. And that's with insurances. So the way I like to think about it, we deal with basically every insurance you can think of, right? Life, disability, critical illness, home and auto, all that kind of stuff. Insurance can be kind of a weird subject to talk about. For example, like we're life insurance licensed. I've heard a ton of weird things about life insurance salesmen. From a lot of the older industry and stuff like that. But the reality is if something happens, like let's say somebody gets hurt, somebody gets sick, somebody passes away, most people are financially just not prepared for that to happen.
No.
Right? So for example, my dad passed away when I was 3 years old. And it was basically February 1990, or what happened was it was December of 1999. He had life insurance in place. It was term insurance. So basically if they missed a payment, the policy would lapse, right? It's back in 1999. They couldn't just like pay it online or anything like that. And they missed a payment. I can't remember why, but 2 months later, after the policy lapsed, he was basically the same age I am at the time. He's about 26, 27 years old. He was out snowmobiling, hit a culvert, ended up passing away. And because he didn't have the insurance in place, our life completely went down. Pardon my French. I don't know if you care about swearing on here or not.
It's a veteran-based podcast. You can swear all you want. But.
Okay, so everything went down, right? And I watched it happen, right? I watched us sell the house. I watched this, and we had he owned an oil field company at the time when he passed away. No insurance really whatsoever. There's a little bit stuff tied to the house, which was lucky that paid out because selling the house kind of helped fund our life. But we had to sell everything. Sell the house, sell the cars, all the tools and everything like that, the backhoe that we had. Basically everything. Mom had to go back to school. So, the only things I actually have left from my dad are a jean jacket and a couple of rifles. And that's it.
That's wild.
And we had to move all over the place, right? And, it sucks because if you would have had proper coverage in place, all we would have had to worry about is actually just living and grieving and everything like that, right? So we just want to make sure if somebody doesn't believe in coverage, whatever, that's really up to them. We're at least doing our due diligence, saying hey, I recommend this because this, just showing them first off, what type of insurances are out there, why we'd recommend them, how much coverage we'd recommend. And then if they see value, if they want to get it, that's where we'll shop around, find them the best rate, the best product, everything like that. Right. And we just want to make sure here that while people are dealing with their plan, right, while they're saving for retirement, paying off their debt, saving for kids' education, if something happens, that they have other money coming in, right? So we're not, I mean, I seen 2 GoFundMe's this week, right? They pop up everywhere. I see them all over Instagram. I see them all over Facebook. I'm pretty sure I see them on LinkedIn all the time. When you see GoFundMe, 9 times out of 10, that's because that person didn't have coverage. So, I mean, it's going to be better than nothing. I love that they exist, but you know, what's that going to raise? 8 grand, 10 grand?
Right. Not a long-term strategy. Let's put it that way. Not something to rely upon when the worst happens.
It's a, you know, it's unfortunate that people just, you know, the awareness isn't really out there, and that's what we're trying to do, right? For example, like critical illness coverage. Have you ever heard of that before?
Yeah, of course. Me and my wife have it.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. Most
people have it. It's something like 8% of Canadians actually have critical illness coverage. So I'm going to explain it on here because I'm very passionate about this product. If that's all right with you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So critical illness coverage, for those that are listening, it's covers somebody if they end up getting sick. So it covers usually around 25 conditions, things like cancer, heart attack, stroke, heart surgery, things along those lines. And if somebody ends up coming down with one of those conditions, the company's going to pay them, you know, usually a one-time lump sum tax-free payout, and they can use that money for whatever they want. So let's say it's, you know, maybe they have $50,000 of critical illness coverage and they end up getting cancer. Well, in Alberta, you know, the government covers chemotherapy, which is awesome. But a lot of the time, what they don't cover is the medication to deal with chemo, taking time off work, paying the bills, having parents drive you to the hospital and back, right? I had a friend, his name was Damon. He ended up passing away in 2020. One of the main reasons why is because his medication for his chemotherapy was $5,000 a month, and they ran out of money. And it's just one of those things where, for him, he was 17 when he got diagnosed. $50,000 to $100,000 of critical illness coverage would have cost him under $20 a month. Right? That's less than $1 a day. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those things where we want to at least educate them about it. If they don't want it, awesome. That's really up to them. But at least we're teaching them this stuff. So emergency fund, proper insurance. If at the end of the day I could just do that for somebody, that's what I want to do.
That's okay.
But yeah. But after this, though, because if you look, you know, if we have more cash flow, our debt's taken care of, we have an emergency fund and proper coverage, there's nothing really that can hurt us at that point. Foundation's set. So all you want to do after that is just start building, right? You start building wealth. You know, you start adding floors to your tower. Mm-hmm. And then after you're done building it, you want to start preserving. And that's where you can start talking about like long-term, like life insurance strategies, where we're going to invest this, setting up like trusts, setting up, you know, estate plans for people. So we can start actually passing on wealth instead of just kind of hoping and praying that we have enough in retirement.
Right. So this is a really straightforward 6-step process. And those first 4 are really the key. So like, if you don't have cash flow, you know, that's the blood of any company, any household. You need to have that cash flow. Even if it's a minimal amount, you can still do something so long as you have that cash flow. And then we move into debt management, which I think that's something that I'd like to touch base a little bit more on, because that's something that at least I'm trying to think back to, like when I was still a troop. I didn't understand this. I didn't understand any of how this worked. I just spent money on credit cards, and then I, you know, I was a poor student too, you know, like I was a reservist. I would live like, basically I would clear enough off my credit card so that I could spend a little bit that was left for food and stuff like that. And it was just I was just scraping by basically until I went on tour, and then I started making some actual money and was able to pay off my debts. But I didn't understand that you could get, you know, lines of credit that had a lower interest rate. I didn't understand this whole process of debt management. And even when I got a mortgage, I still didn't really fully understand it until a few years in. So can we touch on that debt management side of things a little bit? Because I think it'd be really important for the young, not only just the younger troop, but even, you know, the seasoned individual who's like, I got credit card debt, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of different ways to deal with that. You want to talk about a first number, or let you kind of?
Yeah. So with debt management, there's a few ways that we go about managing a client's debt. You know, we can, like I said, if someone owns a house and they've got a whole bunch of debt, If they have enough equity built up within their property, we can actually roll some of their debt into the equity of that house under what's called a home equity line of credit, or a HELOC. Now, it's not something, it isn't a product that everyone has access to. They, have to have enough equity built up in their property for it. But let's say they have 15 grand on a credit card at 20%. If we move that $15,000 at 20% interest into their mortgage, and now it drops it down to 4%, right? If they roll it into a refinance, and then with a home equity line of credit, it's a little bit more than a mortgage payment, but now they have that super secure line of credit. That's the collateral's the house that they can pay off. So all of a sudden they're going from that 20% right down to 4% interest. So that's one way we can do that. Again, with just freeing up some debts with the mortgage. And then, like Braden said earlier, with the consumer proposal, if someone is in that hard of a spot, then we can go about it that way.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add, Braden?
Well, if I can just jump in there, I just did some quick math. If $15,000 on a credit card, I think that's pretty, that's not outrageous. I think a lot of people are living that way.
Average Canadians right now have between 20 and 30 grand in just consumer debt. So credit cards, lines of credit.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And yeah. Okay. So if that's on your credit card, and at 20%, that's a hefty amount of interest. That's
once you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, so that's about $3,000 in just interest payments in a year if you're paying that. Now, if you drop that down to 4%, right, now you're down to $600 a year. So you saved $2,400, if my math is right, just by doing that one simple maneuver and talking to the bank, being like, hey, I got equity in my house. Can we make this happen? And that's what we have. And that's been the best option that we could have ever imagined, because we're able to do things at a much lower interest rate. And we have zero credit card debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pat myself on my back there. That's my wife.
Yeah.
You should be proud of yourself. I would pat your back as well. Okay, good job.
Actually, Dave, if you want, I got a slide we can pull up.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. This slide that I think he's pulling up might be one of the first clients I actually ever saw his help. Back in the day when I was brand new. Do you want to run through this one, Stumper, or do you want me to?
I got it.
All right.
So here we have a awesome example of a client where we really put to use HELOC for this client. Now, we actually don't set the HELOCs up. We just advise the client to go to the bank and ask for this specific product. So this client here, we can see, change colors here. We can see that they had, $19,500 in credit card debt, and that was sitting at 25% interest. So just gross, hey?
That's awful.
Yeah, their minimum payment was $387, right? So they were paying, their minimum was $387. And out of that minimum payment of $387, $376 went straight to interest. So only $10 a month actually went to this particular client's actual debt. If we just look over on the right, so balance of 19.5 at 25%. This client was actually paying a little bit more every month, and it was expected that they were going to pay this off in 115 months. So what that looks like in actual terms of cash, over that 115 months, they were going to pay $32,000 to the bank in interest, totaling $51,600. Luckily for this client, through our info gather and just doing our due diligence, we found out that this client had about $400,000 of equity in their property, right? So what we did was we advised the client go and open a HELOC at their bank. And this particular HELOC was at 4.45%, substantially lower than 24. So this balance at 4.5%, that same $450 payment They're going to pay it off in 48 months. And now instead of paying $32,000 in interest, they're paying about $1,800.
There you go.
So just by advising the client to open this and leverage that equity that they already had, we saved them over $30,000. And if I remember correctly, yeah, this was 2019. So this client is going to be paying this off this year. And then they were just going to keep making that same $450 payment, but just roll it into an investment account for their retirement down the road. Since they're already used to having that money come out every month, you just switch where it's going and go from there.
That's the fifth step of the build. Then, like, they've got their debt like away, like taken care of. Now they can do the smart things. Like, well, this is already coming out of my account. Why would I just take this? Now I can actually build it and grow it, and then be better, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. That's really that's a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that's just the kind of things that we don't get paid to set this up. It's just something that because if we do the right things for our clients today, down the road in 4, 5, 6 years, they're still going to come back to us because we did the right thing for them at the beginning. We showed them immense value for what they, had.
Yeah. Well, a savings like $30,000 in your pocket is not chump change, right? Like that's
no.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, it's because this is all done mostly on a screen, right? Like you can see like your bank accounts, everything like that. Like nobody gets like wads of cash for their pay anymore. Like, so you don't tangibly have that. So I think there's a disconnect, right? It's like, that I got $20,000 debt on my credit card. Like, it sucks, but it is what it is. But then when you can come back and say like, yeah, but look, I can save like years of you paying this off, and you have $30,000 now to play with that you wouldn't have had. That's like psychologically, that's huge. Like that would make such a huge difference just in like anybody's life to say like, hey man, like, in a few years time, you have an extra 30 grand and you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
That's huge. I just wanted to touch on just a quick stat here that I got from Canada.ca about financial struggle. It says that 48% of Canadians say they've lost sleep because of financial worries, and 44% say that it would be difficult to meet their financial obligations if their pay is late. That sounds awful. Like I went into a kind of a dip when I left my teaching career. I grabbed a new job in a completely unrelated field. That didn't work out. I got fired. And then I was kind of like lost in the sauce. And I was like, oh my God, like I got to go on EI. Like, I was no longer in the military. I didn't really have a safety net. Like, granted, my wife was working. We had a house, we had kids, but I felt that stress, and I don't ever want to have that stress again, where it's like, oh man, I don't know where money's coming from. Like, I'd have no more EI. Like, it was an awful feeling. And if 50% of the country is feeling that,
well, there's a huge need for what we do. not like we as in, just like investment advisors or financial advisors at a bank, but that unique holistic approach that we bring to the table through our company.
So like a big part, those first 3 steps, the cash flow, debt management, emergency fund, we don't get paid for them. I don't get paid anything for helping somebody save like 20 grand in a bank account.
Right.
I don't like, maybe cash flow if we find like a better insurance and they go through us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like debt management, that's like basically I might get paid like $100 if it's a consumer proposal referral, just because. But that's where most of the work needs to get done for most people. It's like changing habits and all that stuff. If somebody already has like a pension and stuff, like, we'll get paid by the investment companies for bringing them a new pension client, basically. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like a lot of this is just like behavioral, helping people out in that way, just teaching them this stuff, caring about them. You're caring about them is a big one because, well, and another thing too, like the financial industry historically is trended and is currently trending more towards helping just higher net worth clients, right? Usually somebody doesn't have like 100, 200, 300, 400 grand cash. most, like a lot of investment advisors just aren't even going to talk to them. They'll go through the front door at the bank, and a lot of the times they'll just go right to that front counter, and the people at the front counter, they're not like mutual fund licensed a lot of the time. So they'll get handed something like a GIC, a little cookie cutter investment where they'll guarantee them 2% returns, but then they'll hand them a credit card on the way out the door.
Right.
And it's like when people are struggling, even 2020, great example. Okay, you know what? We're not going to really help you with your payments. You can defer them for 6 months or whatever I can't remember the exact number, but let's say it's 6 months, right? You don't have to pay these for 6 months, but we're still going to keep accruing interest on it. And then when you come back, your payment's probably going to be higher than what it was.
Right.
And then somebody who's paycheck to paycheck comes back to that after racking up their credit cards, and because CERB, like $2,000 a month wasn't really helping them.
No.
Racking up their credit cards, racking up their lines of credit, whatever happened. Maybe they were leveraging equity there, or they just bought a house right before COVID happened and then they had to defer it. They come back if they have a job after everything.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden they've got all these huge payments and they're just struggling, right? And a lot of it is like the education side of things. People just aren't talking about it. And nobody's, we have the tools in the toolbox to help them with that. And a lot of other people and other companies just frankly don't give a shit. Like it's like, oh, you've got $50 a month to put away and you're drowning in debt. Figure it out, dude. Like come back when you have 50 grand or like 100 grand.
Here, we'll give you another $10,000 on your credit card.
Yeah, we'll raise the limit on your line of credit so you can.
Right. So you can pay us more down the road. And that's it's a great business model. Like, let's be honest. It's like, well, we know you're in a pinch. You don't really understand this well enough. We're going to give you a lifeline, but we're ultimately going to make a shit ton of money off of this. Like that's, it's unfortunate, but that's typically how most people will go handle their debt, right? They'll put themselves in more. Well, our freaking countries do it. Like,
exactly.
like how do we handle debt? Well, we make more of it and then it'll balance out, right? Like it seems like cuckoo bananas that, the individual has to do all this work to just make sure that we don't get crushed by debt. But then our country is able to just make new money to get out of it. It just seems like we're parallel universes, right? But ultimately, like what I want to see like through the community and talking to you guys is just, okay, how do we figure this out so that we don't have to be like suffering psychologically, physically from being in a shit financial state? So how do we start? Like, let's say we've got like the foundation covered, like, hey, cash flow is good. We're covered with insurance. We've got, reserve fund. Okay. Now how do we start to build? Like we've got that extra $400, $500, maybe $1,000 a month. Where do I put that money? Like, I don't just want to sock it under my bed or like put it in a savings account. What do we do now? Because it seems like there's that I think was, and still kind of is the overwhelming kind of anxiety that comes up. It's like, I don't want, like, I grew up in a very middle-class family. Don't lose your money. It was like, don't put it in everything safe. It was like GICs and bonds. And that's what I grew up with. All these other products like stocks, everything like that was like, no, that's where you lose your money. That's where people go to like gamble. Don't do that. Play it safe. Mm-hmm. But I know now, like you got to have a balance. You can't just be all safe because as we can see now, like inflation is going through the roof. We're not getting the same returns on the investment products. So like, what does the average Joe do now to start building their money and growing?
It's actually very, very simple.
It's very simple.
It's like we kind of went off on a couple tangents here, but literally what we teach just in the initial point, we call it the pillars of wealth. I literally draw it out. Usually takes like 15 minutes, and it's actually pretty simple. Like and I guess I actually have a book here that if somebody has the ability to read this, I definitely recommend it. It's called Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray. I don't know if that's backwards for you guys.
No, it's good.
It is. It's so simple. And honestly, I'm a big fan of having equities, right? We have funds, like we deal with segregated funds.
Sorry, for the individuals, like, I don't know what an equity is. Like what's equity? Equity
is so basically, instead of like bonds, which are offered by like a government or a large corporation, or basically you lend your money to like Canada savings bonds or war bonds. You lend your money to the government of Canada and they basically say, oh, we're going to give you this % of interest back. So it's like well, we're going to pay a 3% interest.
Yeah.
Right. So they're kind of like a steady Eddie, because if the government of Canada is not paying back their bills, like we've got bigger problems than making money.
Right.
Which I mean, we can talk about that later, but whatever. So, I'm more of a fan, instead of like lending our money to someone and having them like pay it back, I'm more a fan of being more into equities and owning things. So when people talk about risk in the markets, like I'm going to dig into a couple things. This is just something I want to address. I might even draw this up as well. This is going to be some fun stuff. So I love talking about investments, by the way.
They're my favorite topic as well. I know just with my own personal investments, since coming here and managing it through us, it's been life changing, to say the least.
Yeah. It's we're having a bet, like who has to buy who a bottle of scotch based on how fast it grows. So it's been
nice. Growth challenge accepted.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when people talk about risk, I've been talking about this a lot, is risk in the markets, if you're doing it properly, it does not equal like losing all of your money.
No.
All risk means is volatility. It's how bumpy your ride is on the way there. So, let's say somebody's investing in you can talk about something like a GIC, right? Guaranteed investment certificate. They guarantee you a 2% rate of return, right? Which, the guarantee is technically nice, but the problem with it is that inflation in Canada this year, they're saying it's 6.7, but everything's costing so much more. But even historically in Canada, it's between like 3 and 4% a year. So if our money's growing at 2%, but everything's costing 3 or 4, well, what's happening to our money at the end of the day?
Yeah, you're losing essentially 1% every year to inflation.
Yeah. So
it's like you're being taxed 1% more every year.
Kind of, yeah. So, maybe that's what our line's going to look like right there with a GIC. Maybe it's going up a little bit. I'm just going to use a straight line for I don't want to try and draw like a 1 degree angle here. But, there's a couple different types of investors, right? There's someone that's more of a conservative investor. Maybe they have in their portfolio like 60% bonds and then 40% stocks, right? And that might get them a, 4-5% return, like 4-ish, right? Usually what you see. So maybe we're looking like that. It's a very, very like steady line, but you're not really getting a lot of growth. So maybe we go a little bit more aggressive, right? So we go more like a balanced portfolio, which would be more like 60% stocks and 40% bonds. I'll call it balanced. And then, maybe you're looking at like a 5 to 6% return. Here, I'll write these over here. It's like 2%, 4%. Let's call this 5 to 6. And then, we can go someone like technically, because when you're talking investments, the aggression of a fund is based on how much equities or stocks is in it. But the way you solve that is you just diversify more. You just go into more industries, more stocks. So it's kind of like evened out over everything. But let's say we go with more of like an aggressive portfolio, which is, let's call it 80% stocks, 20% bonds. You're looking more at like an 8 to 10-ish % return. And then you go, it'd be like aggressive growth or an aggressive portfolio. So this would be like a growth portfolio, sorry. And this would be aggressive. And aggressive would be 100% just stocks inside of a portfolio. And that's where you're usually looking at around 10 plus. Right. And, when you're thinking about that with people, so the line for a 10+% portfolio might look like this. Right. So it's a little bumpy. It's kind of scary or whatever. And then maybe 8 to 10 looks a little bit more like this. Right. So it depends on what somebody can tolerate, how bumpy of a ride they can handle. But another thing to pay attention to, though, because and I guess a good rule of thumb as well when it comes to investing is if everybody's really, really excited and really, really buying all the time, don't really believe the hype so much, And if everybody's running away, you kind of want to actually start buying more. So you almost want to do the opposite of what the public is doing.
It's the Warren Buffett model. When people are fearful, get in.
Yeah, and this is why. Because every time, because people see a big dip like this is here. I'll draw 2019 for you. Basically, 2019 was going awesome, and then 2020 happened, and we did this.
What happened in 2020? Is there something that kind of screwed the whole planet up? It's weird. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll take
massive drop in the markets, right? And what happens here? This happens because people are a lot of the time emotional investors. They see, oh God, everything's going down. I better sell now, right? Well, maybe in their portfolio, let's say they have, just to kind of keep this simple, right? It's obviously a little more complicated than this, but let's say we own 100 shares of Apple, right? All of a sudden the markets drop. We still own 100 shares of Apple. They're just worth less than they were before, just based on the markets, right? So when you're buying like a car or a house or even toilet paper, like I know everybody's freaking out, do you buy less or more when it's on sale and it's cheaper?
Right. You always want to buy things on sale. You
instinctively
know, like, hey, this is a deal. I'm going to get it.
So a lot of like the smarter investors, like we had people like reaching out to us. It's like, oh, RBC is down 50%. Okay, buy me a bunch of like RBC and financial like investments. Because right after what happened in COVID, markets did this. They shot right back up. So what most people do is they panic around like here or here, and they'll go lock into something high in bonds or a GIC, and they'll get stuck down here with their value. Where if they just would have, thrown an extra $100 in or whatever, they actually take advantage of the upswing. Then the markets, they're doing this again right now. So what a lot of people are doing is selling and freaking out. Where smarter investors, they're buying here because it's all on sale again. Right. Especially if you're not going to pull that money out for 20 or 30 years, right? The stock market historically, and it's in this book as well. Over like a 1 year period, it's your 75%. I can't remember the stats. I don't want to have the wrong stats on here, but it's something like 75% likely to be up within a 1 year period. Over a 10-year period or more, and I think a 20-year period, you're like a 100% guarantee to be up.
So that comes down, so that really comes down to like how long, like what are you in the game for? Like, are you in the long game or are you in the short game? You know what I mean? And I think
that's what comes to like sitting down with the client, figuring
right. Like, like if you're 30 years old, you're making some money. It's like, okay, well, you're not investing necessarily. Maybe you've got like, oh, I want to get something in 5. Maybe you want to get a house or something like that. Okay, it's like, okay, so you got a near-term goal, but long-term, what's the outlook, right? The long-term is like the only game in town, in my opinion. Like if you're like, for me, my investments, I'm long on everything, and this is how I started just building just a basic strategy, just looking at the markets, and I'm like, well, the markets traditionally always go up, and it's just a trend line on human behavior. People sell, like you said, when they get panicked and they sell everything. It's like, but I bought this like I bought the stock from a company because I researched them. I think they're doing good work. I think they have a lot of value. So why would I sell this now when I know that maybe 20, 30 years time is going to be worth significantly more? So that's just how I look at it. But that's just me, right? So, but somebody that sees all of a sudden their portfolio, they've lost, 20, 30%. And it's their investment savings. It's what they're going to retire on. Like, how do you walk somebody off the edge of like hitting the sell button and be like, no, don't worry, it's going to recover? Because that could be like that plays on your emotions, right? That volatility. It's like, oh my God, 20% dip. What do I do?
The best thing to do is warn them before they invest with you.
Okay.
You're like, hey, by the way, there are going to be ups and downs.
Right.
When they're down, it's on sale. I would recommend tossing some more money in there. Because
so flip your mindset to like, hey, this is actually the best thing for you right now.
You're not losing money. Everything's on sale.
That's awesome. Okay.
And then it goes back to that educational approach when we'll tell them, risk doesn't mean you're going to lose everything when it goes down. It'll come back up. We'll show them, like most of the funds that we pick and recommend, we want to see a minimum of like a 10-year track record. So that shows us the rebounds after the big drops. And then we keep them diversified. We show them together and we just show them what a portfolio has done over 10, 15 years historically. And then that shows us like through 2020, through 2014, through 2008, through 2000, it'll show the drops plus the rebounds. And then we educate them on, see, these things happen. And here's how this portfolio has navigated those storms. And then you can see here at the end, it's, still up X amount.
Okay. So yeah, when we're talking about portfolios here, like if you're talking to like a beginner investor, a portfolio is essentially what? It's just a collection of different assets. So like stocks, bonds, and the percentages. And so like you could have literally anything in there, and it's based off of like what you want to put in, or what, like, let's say the bank has a fund and you take that fund and take that portfolio and say, hey, I think this might be the best fit for your goals moving forward.
Yeah, I got it for that. So there's 4 main areas that people can invest their money in Canada. I guess technically 5 if you consider like Bitcoin. I consider Bitcoin's cryptocurrencies like an individual stock, right? Because you're basically owning a physical or like a digital entity.
Yeah.
But the 4 main ones that we always talk about, first one's a GIC, right? So guaranteed investment certificate. These are very, very popular with the bank. And the main reason why is because it's one of their profitable products. Basically what they do, they go guarantee us a 2% rate of return. Now they have our money basically within their bank, then they'll go reinvest it, or they'll lend it back to us. Reinvest it at like 8-10% returns, lend it back to us at 20-25% interest or whatever, right? So with a GIC, nice part about that is the guarantee. Problem though, is because it's guaranteed, it's typically a low rate of return, right? Usually what you're seeing is around 1 to 2%. It follows interest rates typically. So back when mortgages, like around the 80s and stuff, were 10-12%, GICs were also 10%. So it depends. Right now they're hovering between like the 2 to 3.5-ish, right? But let's say we're getting 2% in a GIC. Well, the problem we run into is when it comes to inflation, right? Because like I talked about already, if our money's only growing by 1 or 2, but everything's costing 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, like it was this year, we're kind of we're going backwards, right? So that's the first area somebody can invest. The next one is when it comes to bonds, right? And I kind of talked about these already, but bonds, basically what we're doing, we're lending our money to either the government or a large corporation. And then they just give that money back to us at a specified rate of return. So bonds are typically medium risk and return.
Yeah, theoretically, you get a better rate of return from a corporation, but because there is a possibility that corporation goes bankrupt and you get nothing back. But the government, shouldn't be going bankrupt.
I actually had a client where they were invested in really high interest bonds from a company and they went bankrupt. They're promising 10%.
Wow.
The guy was telling everybody that they guaranteed 10%. So he like lost his license and kind of he got in trouble there. But a lot of people lost a lot of money because he's like, oh, you're guaranteed 10%. Give me your $100,000 pension. And they were just investing it in this high interest bond, right? Okay. But most of the time when it comes to bonds, we're talking about like lending to the government of Canada, McDonald's, like Walmart or something like that, where they want to, they give us like a 3-4% rate of return. Because bonds a lot of the time are more of our kind of steady security net when it comes to that. So bonds, what I like them for is when somebody's more in retirement and we need more of a stable income, right? You have your $1 million, $2 million saved up and you want to live off the interest it produces. Bonds are very good for that.
Okay.
So having like more of like a balance, maybe more of a conservative portfolio that's making like 5-6% returns. So when somebody's going real aggressive when they're younger, the way to solve that, like the risk when they're going retirement, is just when they hit like 65, you change it to like a conservative portfolio.
Gotcha.
So after bonds, right, that's when we have stocks. And I'm pretty sure most people have a rough understanding of how stocks work, where basically we become a partial owner of a company, right? Let's say we go buy an Apple stock, we become like a 0.0001% owner of Apple. So the nice thing about stocks is that there is a high return potential But the problem with them is a lot of the time it's usually associated with a high risk. So good example, there was a company, when I was out in Drayton Valley, there's a company called Penwest. And back in 2012, 2013, it was blowing up. Everybody wanted oil field work. Penwest took over like this huge section of town. It was a massive company. And it was like everybody worked at Penwest, right? And I had a buddy of mine. And basically, Penwest had stock options. He dumped $100,000 into Penwest stock in 2012. 2 years later, Penwest went bankrupt and he lost everything. Right? And people that have invested in things like Aurora Cannabis, they're probably feeling that pain too. And the way I like to explain it with stocks is that, if somebody has the time and the money to research it and actually watch the markets all the time and actually knows what they're doing, stocks are an awesome option, right? Problem is most people don't. They go get a hot tip from a guy at work, or like this crazy stuff that's with like GameStop and BlackBerry. Whatever. Like they get a hot tip and then they just dump a bunch of $1,200 or whatever into this stock. Then they lose a bunch of money a lot of the time, right? So the way I like to explain it, let's say we're in an elevator and the cable's holding the elevator up. Let's say that's our stock that we're invested in, right? Something happens to that stock, we're basically down here not having a good time, right? So what we deal with, because all three of these, there's, they have their pros and cons, but like individually, they're not the best. So what we typically deal with is something called investment funds. So that's where you hear things like mutual funds or segregated funds. And basically what that is, it's a combination of stocks and bonds inside of a portfolio. So the ones we use, they're professionally money managed. So we actually have teams of people, like 10, 15 people. Typically, they've been working in the industry for 15, 20 years. And all they've been doing is working in the stock market. So they've got the experience. They know what they're doing. And they've got a lot of money to work with because it's a big pooled fund. There's usually like a couple $100 million inside of these investments. So they can go buy like the Facebooks and the Amazons and the Apple, right? So they've been doing this a long time. They know what they're talking about. They have a lot of like resources to work with there, and they handle all that stuff. We don't have to watch the markets every day. So they choose the stocks and bonds inside of the portfolio. And the nice thing about it, you still have the high return potential because it can be all stocks. But instead of one stock, it can be invested in 30, 40, 50, 100 companies, right? Then you put a couple different funds together. Like one of my favorite portfolios, it's got a Canadian fund, a global fund, a healthcare fund, and a tech fund. And they all kind of balance each other out. Some are a little bit more aggressive than the others. And it's been averaging, I don't remember the numbers offhand, but like 10 to 15% returns, something like that, 10 to 12. And very, very like low risk because it's so diversified, right? Over the last 10 years, I don't think it's had a down year yet. It's down right now because the markets are kind of in the hole, but it's usually at least at like 1% positive and having typically pretty good returns.
Right.
So you can get good returns. But the nice thing about that, it is diversified. So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So you take that same elevator, same guy inside of it, or girl, whoever you want sitting inside of there. Instead of one or two cables holding us up, we've got 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 different cables, right? Mm-hmm. So if one or two of these snap, like I know Netflix took a big hit.
Yep.
Well, if Netflix kind of hurts the bed, they might just buy more of it, depending on what they think. But, first off, the other cables are holding us up, but also these money managers, they're kind of like our elevator mechanic. They're going to come in here and switch out the faulty cables. Mm-hmm. Right. So 99% of the time, right, it's like the risk, like if somebody loses all of their money and they're in portfolios like that, something happened. Like did something big happen. And it's usually not that big of a deal. It just, you're going to have bigger ups and downs. Right. So it really, what it depends on is somebody's situation. If somebody's 65 and they're retiring tomorrow, I'm not going to put them in like a big tech fund that's averaging 20%.
Right. Okay. So I guess that brings me to my next question. Like, let's take that, that number 65, like, oh, that's our retirement age. You want to have enough money so that you theoretically don't have to work another day in your life. So you don't need to worry about like cash flow. That's essentially it. You want the freedom to just say like, all right, I can go play with my grandkids. I can go take a trip. I can live at the same standard of living that I have essentially, let's say now, I like my standard of living, and ensure that by the time, and I think that's the big question now. Like, let's say I hit 65. Well, like I'm taking care of myself. Like I could live till I'm 90 and be good to go. I don't want to run out of money. That's like a big fear of mine. Like I don't want to run out of freaking money. And I think if we go by like just, typically you live to like, I think the standard, like I think it's 77. Like I think a man in Canada life expectancy is like 76, 77. I'm not entirely sure on that. So that's like 12 more years for my money to last. But realistically, I want my money to last like 30 years. So how do I possibly make that calculation based on what I'm making now, not knowing what the future holds, so that I can be like, all right, I think I'm good to go. I don't think I'll have to like go to the food bank when I'm like 85 and like beg for food because I ran out of money.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing we show people. It's something called a financial independence number. And it's also like a lot of this stuff is honestly pretty simple. So I'll explain this and then kind of how it all fits together with the plan. And it's the only thing, like the only problem people run into after they know this stuff is just where they're going to get the funds that are going to get them those returns that they need. Because usually, they go somewhere, they go get a cookie cutter, like a conservative portfolio at a bank, it's making 5-6%. Maybe that's not enough to get to their retirement, right? But what we do first, so with the financial independence number, I just like to call it a FIN number. That's just a target number for how much money we actually need to save in order to retire. So let's say somebody's 30 years old right now, and they want to retire at 65, right? And, maybe average life expectancy in Canada is like 85-ish, 90-ish is kind of good for women. But I usually run it to around 85. If it's a couple, I usually run it around age 90. So let's do 90, right? So in this period, we've got basically 35 years to grow our money. All right, a little 35 there. And then our money has to last 25 years in retirement. So maybe this person's starting right from scratch, and maybe this person makes $60,000 a year right now, right? Or maybe that's what they make as a household. Let's call it just that person, right? If they're making 60 grand a year. So usually if somebody does want that same lifestyle in retirement, the first thing we need to think about is inflation, right? So if we run inflation at around 3%, and I've just run this number a lot, so that's kind of how I know it.
Right.
This person here at 65, they're going to have to spend between 170 and 180 grand to get the same buying power.
In 35 years.
In 35 years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's also something to account for. So if we need to have 180 grand a year for 25 years in retirement, and that's also including, having the interest coming in that I was telling you about, like the 5-6% kind of helping us there. This will just punch out a number, right? For this person here, it's because, also like old age security and CPP kicks in. I don't know if it's going to be around in 30 years. I also don't know if they're going to qualify if they're having to spend 180 grand a year. So it depends, right? I don't know how it's going to be. I don't have, crystal ball or anything, but let's say they just have to save this cash. For this person, it's anywhere from like 1.9 to 2.2-ish million, I think. I can't remember the numbers up. We have a calculator that does this stuff for us. So $2.2 million. Let's say that's their financial independence number. You show somebody a number like $2.2 million and their brain shuts off because it doesn't make
power down. I don't know. That's a big number.
So when I started here, I was 22 years old. My FIN number is like 2.7. And I just remember I was like, man, I can like barely make my credit card payment right now. What's going on? And it freaked me out. So what we do is we break this down into something a little more digestible. So maybe for this person,
the number, break it down, back engineer it.
Yeah. So this person, I think I ran the number the other day. It might be like, I think it was like $700 a month for this person, right? $700 a month at, I believe, an 8% return. I might be wrong, could fix it later, but I'm pretty sure that's the numbers there. So for this person here, right? First off, if they can't afford $700 a month, we help them try to find it, right? Cash flow, helping with debt, freeing up all that stuff. So that's why we do the other three first. We don't get rid of their debt. So that $450 payment, like that woman was paying, can go towards the actual savings, right? So maybe if they still can't afford it after we help them free it up, you can play with the numbers a bit. Maybe they retire at 68 instead, and instead of 180 grand, maybe we live off 150 grand. That might drop it down to like $500 a month or something like that. Depends on the client, depends on the situation. Maybe they'll have pensions paying out. That might help pay with it as well, right? If they were in the military or whatever. So we run this number first because this FIN number is basically our GPS destination for our retirement, right? You need to get to $2.2 million. The plan that we build with the investments, with the debt, like the debt management, with dealing with insurances, right? That's all our route to make sure we actually get to that number. So it's pretty simple. It's like, okay, I need to get $500 a month at an 8% return. How do we get the $500 a month? This. Okay, how do we get the 8% return? Easy peasy. Here's a portfolio. Okay, stick to the plan. We follow up every like 6 months or every year, make sure they're still going. And then in the meantime, maybe we saved up, had like some extra cash there. We also want to make sure they have coverage in place, life insurance, critical illness, disability. So if somebody gets sick, hurt, or passes away, we're not messing this plan up.
Yeah.
We're not racking up credit cards. We're not spending our retirement savings, right? We're not throwing everything away. And that's it. That's all it really takes.
That's really simple. Actually, one thing that I'm gleaning from this is like, okay, let's say, you're 30 and you're like, okay, it's time to start buckling down. But imagine you started when you were, let's say 20, and it may not be like you have $700 a month, maybe you have 100, but like that, the power of compounding over an extra 10 years.
Huge.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like I didn't know anything until basically I turned 30. That's because I actually made like a dump load of cash being on tour. And that kind of like forced me to be like, wait, what do I do with this? Like, I still had like student level aspirations. Like, maybe I'll just get a car and like a cool Xbox. And like, I'll just like I wasn't thinking long-term per se.
That real truth mentality.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, maybe I'll get a Ford F-150 and just like blow it up, but I had the wherewithal to be like, no, I'm just going to hold on to it and see what happens, and then I was able to, we have a house, me and my wife always saves. So unlike me, so we're able to do that. And we've been able to set our foundation up pretty well, now that I'm 40 and she's, not 40. I won't disclose her age on the podcast, but, we're, I guess we say lucky because we kind of backed our way into that. But if this was just something that a 20, like, there's no reason why a teenager or a 20-year-old can't understand this. Like, hey, like, dude, just take a little bit off of whatever you're making. I know it may seem like a lot now, but trust me, like in 50 years, you're going to be like, wow, I'm glad I put that like $20 a week away or $40 or whatever, because holy crap, man, like, because it would still be theoretically the same number. Let's say 2.2 million, maybe a little bit more. But with that extra 10 years, like you're kicking ass and taking names if you've put a few $1,000s a year away. Man.
Oh, yeah.
Man. I got a perfect example of that. But yeah, so with compound interest, the thing I like to talk about a lot, and this is huge for getting returns, it's also huge for dealing with debt. So this is one of the things I like to talk about. Like when we go through our pillars of wealth, this is like the third thing we go over because it's super important, and it's something called the rule of 72. So Albert Einstein, pretty smart guy back in the day, he's the person that made this famous. And basically how it works is you take 72 and you divide it by the rate of return that someone's getting on their investment. It'll tell you approximately how many years it's going to take for that money to double. So it's not exact, and obviously a lot of investments, they're not going to make the same return every year, right? That's just kind of my disclaimer up front. So we're talking about 8% returns. That's averaging it, right? Some years they'll make a 22% return. Some years they'll make like a -4. It's the ups and downs, but over the years they average them, right? So for this example, let's use a GIC first, right? We're talking about that like 1 to 2% rate of return up here. So let's say we're getting 2% rate of return in the GIC at the bank. Well, 72 divided by 2 is 36. So our money's going to take approximately 36 years to double. So you got that 30-year-old. Let's say they got 10 grand in the bank, right? 36 years later, we're basically ready to retire, and we're 66 years old now, and our money's grown to a whopping 20 grand.
Yeah, all right.
Not very exciting, right? So let's say we start shopping around for some more investments. This person's 30 years old, right? They got, they got quite a bit of time. You can go a little bit more aggressive, right? Maybe we're talking about, let's go with 8. Just let's under promise and over deliver. Maybe the funds are doing 10, 12, 14. Let's aim for 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an 8% return, well, 72 divided by 8 is 9. So our money's going to double approximately every 9 years, which is a little better, right? So same 30-year-old, same $10,000. By the time they're 39, they'll have 20 grand. By the time they're 48, they'll have 40 grand. By the time they're 57, they'll have 80 grand. And that same 66-year-old with the same $10,000 is going to have 160 grand.
It's fascinating.
Massive difference, right?
Yeah.
So I'll show you 2 cool examples here. First off, maybe this guy just got out of the military and he just got his pension and he's got 100 grand. Or won a scratch-off ticket, or got a life insurance payout, or maybe just went to work the rigs and saved a bunch of money. 100 grand, that's a good chunk of change, right? I don't really care how old or young somebody is. 100 grand, if it's only making 2% return, it's only ever going to double up to $200,000, right? And with inflation, it's not really even going to be worth the same it was back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
100 grand over here, though, that's going to double up to $1.6 million. So, and I mean, that's closer to a fin number, right? So maybe they're going a little bit more aggressive. Maybe they're adding money in on a monthly contribution as well, like that extra 200, 300, 400 bucks a month, whatever. Yeah. That's where we start seeing people getting to an actual fin number, right? So the cool thing is, let's say this person here, well, maybe they start at 20, you just add another 10 years here. Well, 1.6 million, it doubles one more time in this, and then they basically have, what is that, 3.2?
3.2.
Yeah. That's up to 65.
Huge. Yeah, huge. I mean, and that's where, a lot of us, when we deployed, right, we're young, we're in our 20s, maybe early 30s, we might have had, some obligations, like house, kids, stuff like that. But at least a lot of my buddies were all kind of free men on the range, right? Might have had a girlfriend, but we didn't really have any like big assets or hard assets or anything like that. And I know the ones that did really well, they were already thinking like, hey, I'm going to take this cash and I'm going to go back home, and they bought buildings, and they started just buying assets. And I was looking at, I'm like, man, that's really cool. And my buddy's like, yeah, dude, you should buy anything, like just get in the housing. I was like, I don't know. It was just one of those things that my typical upbringing wasn't that of an investor. I had this limiting belief that this isn't what I do. Like, I'm not going to be a landlord. That's not what I do. That's not what my family really does. So I just limited myself based on that belief that I had. Whereas my friends were, and they still are, they're doing really well, because obviously the property values have gone through the roof. And on top of that, they make rental income. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Like they had this wherewithal to be like, yeah, let's take that money and invest it. And I had another veteran on, his name is Tristan, and he's, I think he's an insurance broker, if I remember correctly. And he invests heavily into property, and that's what he did with his money from tour, and became financially independent. And now he has his own brokerage in Ontario, I believe. So it's interesting to see, like, once you get that little bit of knowledge and you understand it, and you kind of understand how money works, because I think this is what you're doing here. You're just explaining how money works. And I think fundamentally we don't get it. We spend it. We know that the credit card has to get paid and the bills have to get paid in order to keep the lights on. But aside from that, it's like, I don't really want to learn anything more about it. Let the other people figure it out for me.
It's kind of a taboo subject almost.
Right. And I'm always curious as to like why that would be the case. And I'm sure there's very smart people that have answers and have done research as to like culturally why we don't talk about it, and like why is it seen as like something that we don't really want to talk about, but we want it because we want a better life. But how dare we like actually want to go out and try and improve ourselves around the subject of money, because then it seems as like it's almost like shameful in a way. Like that's the impression, because you're in a social class, like middle class. It's like, we don't do investments. We're not part of that class that invests in stocks and bonds. That's for a whole other group of people. Just go work hard, put your money in the bank, and save and pay your debts. That was my financial model growing up. And now it's no longer that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what most people's financial education is. They go to the bank that's either closest to the house, the one their parents went to, or the one they've been at for like 10 years or whatever. And they walk in through the front door and they ask the bank what to do with their money. And they say like, well, let me tell you.
Hey guys, come in here. What can this guy do?
So that was like me when I got out with my pension. I took my pension as a cash transfer lump sum payment. And I went into my bank and I said, hey, I'm getting out of the Army. I want to, what should I do with my money? And they're like, oh, come on in the back and let me show you something.
We got all kinds of products for you, man. We're going to freaking sort you right out. Now, I had a similar experience, but I was lucky. Shout out to my good buddy, Pete Damien, who were Army bros. And he basically, like any one of us that were getting out, like he'd have gotten out. He's like, okay, let's figure this out. And like his best interest was that we do better, And so those investments have done really well. And that's only because like I had somebody in that corner.
I'm trying to do the exact same thing with everyone I run into, because I saw what mine would have been projected to had I kept it at my bank in the portfolio it was in. And now I get to see where it's going to go. And it's just mind blowing where it's going to go. In the exact same time frame.
It's awesome. Yeah. And I think, I guess just kind of like wind things up here. The key here is like the understanding the fundamentals is like your gateway, right? It's like you're finally opening the door and you're going in, and you're going to get, every time you go learn something new, you're going to have a bunch of different topics that are going to come your way. Like, I don't know anything about this either. Like, we're talking about stocks, bonds, GICs, everything. Okay, cool. That's like entry level. But then there's a whole other set of, products and vehicles and everything that you can go down the rabbit hole on. And it doesn't mean that any one is necessarily better than the other, but it's at least opening you up to the possibility of these things and reaching out to the people that are already experts. And then when you can go to the bank or go to like what you have, at least a working knowledge where you can be like, no, I think I'd be better suited for XYZ, because at the end of the day, it's your money. It's what you want to do with your money, and you're seeking out, advice from experts, and that's what makes you puts you in control. So it's no longer this chaotic mess. It's like, I'm just trying to get by, head down, paycheck to paycheck. And I hope that's what if you're listening, what we can glean from this if you're in a bit of trouble. And so what I want to do now is basically get you guys, out in front of as many people as possible. So you're in Alberta, but I believe from the last conversation we had, like, you don't have to be in Alberta in order to consult with you and invest. Did I get that right?
Yeah, no, we're Canada wide. One nice thing about Code is we do everything virtually now. So I'm personally licensed in Alberta, Nova Scotia. I got a couple of Stumpers licensed in BC. I'm probably going to be getting my BC license soon. Ontario's coming here pretty quick. We just got to just get the licenses once we have the reach. But yeah, as far as that, that's very straightforward. We can help somebody anywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Long story short, between the network that we've built with other advisors within our company, we are pretty much coast to coast and parts of the States as well. We have, obviously, Brad and I, we can't write business in the States, but we have advisors that I would trust sending a client to down there as well. Or I have an advisor, because I don't have my Ontario license as an example, or my Quebec license, but I have someone I would trust in Ontario or Quebec to, send someone to.
Right.
I initially talk to them, feel them out, and then.
And I mean, if the need arises too, we'll just get licensed in that.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
Okay. Right on. So then how does somebody get a hold of you? I think, for a lot of people that are listening right now, they want to get the information. They want to get that knowledge. They want to get that education that you guys are able to provide to at least start. And then once they build that trust, then they can be like, okay, like, look, like, this is where I'm at. Like, I no bullshit. Like, I'm in a lot of pain, or I want to grow. I want to get my retirement sorted. How do they get a hold of you to start that initial conversation?
They could email me at jstump, STUMP 14NWBC at wfgmail.ca. If you want to pop that up on the screen.
Yep, absolutely.
On there. Or you can go to my Facebook, look up Cody James. It'll be a beautiful picture of my family wearing matching plaid shirts. Um,
It is quick. Yeah.
that's just Cody James. I still like to keep a little bit of anonymity on social media. You never know about that.
Right on.
I'm not overly active on Instagram as of yet. I'm still trying to figure out that platform. I keep forgetting.
It's because we're just at that weird edge of like being like millennial Gen Xers. So it's like we kind of get it. Then they add something new and you're like, man, I was just starting to figure this bad boy out. Now you added like reels. I was like, so I get it, man. If you ever need help, just hit me up. I'll give you your tutorial on Instagram, no problem. So Facebook and email, awesome. You guys have a website that they can head to as well?
Yeah, it'll be in the description below because it's pretty long. So just look it up there. Maybe
perfect.
It'll be up on the screen.
Yeah, I'll flash that up on the screen here, and it'll definitely be in the show notes as well, so they can head to that as well and get well sorted. So guys, before we wrap up, any last final thoughts for the individual trying to get into the realm of financial stability and health? And Cody, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, man. Basically, if you have any questions, I mean, like we started off the show with, being financially stable is an element of being hard to kill, because how many of us lose sleep over missing that bill payment or just wondering, could I be in a better spot? And basically at the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do is educate our clients on where they, where they could be.
Right on.
That's basically it. We have a whole toolbox of tools to help along the way. A lot of stuff that we didn't cover. I mean, the areas that we're actually able to help our clients, we could go on for 3 or 4 hours on this and probably still not cover everything.
No doubt.
Pretty remarkable. Actually,
no doubt.
Every day I'm blessed to be working here, and every day I'm learning something new and changing lives.
Right on. And you can tell you're passionate about your work, which is awesome. So Braden, any last final words for the individual trying to get financially healthy?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if all you learn from this is to say open an emergency fund and get some coverage, then that's the main thing. That's if you can get that foundation set and start figuring out stuff with debt and everything, just try to free up some cash if you can. If you can get an emergency fund, like even if it's 10 grand, and get some coverage, right? In life insurance, critical illness coverage, it's not very expensive if you get the right stuff. Even just a little term policy, maybe it costs 30, 40, 50 bucks a month to get totally taken care of. Get that. And then, if you're a contractor or something, like if you're not eligible for EI, go get some disability insurance, because if you get hurt, you and your family are pooched. And then that's it. Just if you can get that, even just for now, while you're figuring stuff out, that'll set you so much farther ahead. And then just mediate debt, get rid of it as fast as you can, however you can do
it. Awesome. Some really good points to move, and actionable points to move forward on today. So Braden, Cody, really appreciate you sitting down and sharing your knowledge. It's going to be really good for the community. Yeah, and like we said, like the stats don't lie, like 50% of Canadians are feeling the pinch. They're in a bad way. If we can eliminate that off the table and be financially healthy, your physical wellness will improve. And that's something that I'm strongly for, obviously, here. And this is what I do, the podcast and everything that I do in my business is to ensure that you become hard to kill, like Cody said. So guys, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting. Really appreciate your time and effort on this matter. This absolutely. I think we might need to do an update a little bit down the road and do a little bit more in-depth stuff on some sexier stuff.
Yeah. Well,
I'll just insurance tax shelters and stuff next time.
Yeah, those are awesome. I was thinking, Dave, just for on the show for you, when you get questions, we should just go through a whole process with you, like obviously not putting anything in place unless you want it, but then you can just see how we actually approach going about our clients.
That'd be an awesome idea. Like basically a show and tell. It's like, all right, let's fix me.
Yeah, exactly.
And my wife would be like, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's make this happen. So yeah, it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Awesome.
Cool. So guys, thanks again. And folks, Don't forget, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace.